I would want people to know the difference between keeping the peace and making peace. It's interesting. Keeping the peace is actually an unhealthy goal in any business. Hi, this is John Baker and Rebecca Eyre from Influence on Purpose. The topic for us today is how do you manage conflict between teammates? And is it your job to do that? Well, it probably is, and it probably helps if you would do something. But how do you manage conflict between teammates? A lot of people just hope it goes away. It'll work itself out. Just let it go. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to turn out that way. A lot of times it just gets worse. Lines get drawn. Stories get told. They get reinforced. You end up with people who are working against each other instead of working together to accomplish a common mission. It starts out as a common misunderstanding or a simple misunderstanding and quickly turns into frustration, mistrust, and then you got these different camps and lines drawn. Productivity suffers. You have people working against each other instead of working to accomplish those goals. The good news is, if you can think of good news as in these situations, the good news is that conflict itself is not the problem. In fact, healthy conflict can strengthen the team, help you to be more innovative, improve decisions, and help your team to grow. A healthy conflict can even bring out high levels of cooperation and collaboration as people find out what their complementary strengths are. So, Rebecca, where would you go from there?
I think the real challenge is knowing how to address conflict before it becomes destructive. Like you mentioned, healthy conflict is actually how you hash out ideas and how you solve issues. If you have a team with no conflict, you have a team where no one's speaking up their mind or speaking their mind and saying what they really think. Everyone's avoiding. You have a team of yes men, and that's not what you want. You're not going to move forward with that. So we're going to talk through 5 practical steps to help you address conflict and actually use it in a healthy way to move your team forward and to solve these problems. Like we mentioned, you can create trust, create understanding, improve your communication, and understand the difference between conflict and contention. Like we mentioned, conflict can be healthy. Different opinions, different ideas. That's actually what helps you become a great team, when you bring these different perspectives and you're helping to each other address the needs of all your stakeholders. When misunderstandings or egos or slights or disagreements are allowed to fester and grow without being resolved or channeled in a healthy way, then it becomes contention. And that's when your team gets divided and isn't working together towards that common goal, like you mentioned. Great teams aren't defined by absence of conflict, right? They're defined by how they handle it. So if you want to have that great team, don't avoid the conflict. Learn how to address it in a healthy, respectful way that brings you all closer to accomplishing the shared mission. So what would you say is the first step that we can tell people to help their teams address conflict?
First step is do not believe that it will work itself out. The odds are it will not, and it'll get harder and harder to solve over time because people's perceptions of each other will can become continually negative, and they'll actually start building stories that support why they can't stand that person and why they're right and the other person is wrong. So the first is be proactive. Do not put it off. Do not ignore it. Do not avoid it. Work to understand the why behind what's really going on. It may look like an interpersonal conflict, but why is this happening? So, as part of step 1A, gather factual information in terms of behaviors. What exactly are people doing? Those measurable things. Here, a lot of us don't have the discipline or the experience to sort the two out, the difference between a fact and our conclusions or stories. So let me give you a really quick example. A fact might be that John comes into work every day at 9:50. The story is John is unreliable, he's constantly late, he doesn't care about us as a team, he's a slack. One is a fact, very measurable. If you come up to John and say, hey John, you're coming in at 9:15 every day, John would probably look at his watch and say, well, yeah, I do. If you come up to John and say, John, you're a lazy, no good slacker, you're probably going to have a very different conversation, and I bet you it doesn't go well. So gather the information in terms of the measurable behaviors, those factual things. And then challenge, what are the conclusions and attributions people are making? So what are we telling ourselves about those things? And then challenge those. For every fact, there are probably almost innumerable legitimate stories, or at least viable stories. Certainly there are 4 or 5. So the odds of your story being right are probably not very good. So
Right.
that would be the first
And
one. Don't put it off, and understand the why behind it.
And I think don't putting it off, it's kind of a difficult one, because on the one hand, you don't want to be petty and nitpicky about everything, right? If someone perceived slight, maybe you can just take the time, think yourself through it, and say, you know what? There's probably a better explanation for this, and I don't really need to worry about it. You know, if someone didn't say hi to me, maybe they just didn't see me, rather than they hate me. But if it's more than that, if it's an actual problem, we often get told, oh, well, just keep the peace. Just keep the peace, just go along. That's just how they are. Why is that not the answer?
You know, I would want people to know the difference between keeping the peace and making peace. It's interesting. Keeping the peace is actually an unhealthy goal in any business. What that means is I'm going to avoid all conflict, right? I'm just going to smooth things over usually. Where making peace is that ability to bring people together on common goals. It's that ability to develop and build upon mutual respect so that people are working better together. So that would be the difference there.
Okay. So that's the healthy part of the conflict.
Yes.
All right. Be peacemakers, not peacekeepers. What's the second thing?
The second thing is deal with people who are behaving contrary to the organization's values or what you want your culture to truly be, right? So if in this initial assessment or investigation, be careful of the word investigation, because you're not solving a crime, but you are digging
Right.
in to figure out what's going on here, right? So in this initial look in, if there are things happening that you know are contrary to your culture or your core values, is somebody actually bullying? Is somebody taking an unfair advantage of someone else and they're just speaking up and resenting, you know? So if you see something like that happen, then you go into that process of investigating that and dealing with it, again, in a proactive way. So first off is, as you start to take that look, if things start to emerge that are truly problematic, and you're going to have good judgment on this. Problematic meaning they're contrary to your core values. They're hurting the mission. Someone is being harmed, disrespected, or abused in some way. So as that happens, then you go into the process that deals with that in your organization.
We have a tool we actually use and recommend people use to help them with, called the stewardship assessment tool, for how you're leading and helping people be aligned with the mission and helping them progress. Because you're going to have these issues. They're not going to, like we've mentioned, you're going to have healthy conflict if you want to make sure that you're guiding people through it. And if you have this misalignment of values, how are you helping them? Or deciding that you have helped them as much as you can and this isn't a good fit.
I would definitely recommend getting that. It's in our book, Influence on Purpose, 5 Principles for Leaders to Build Regenerative Cultures. And it's chapter 8. We also have on our website available a stewardship guide that tells you how to use that tool, gives you quite a bit of support on that.
So what is number 3?
Number 3. So if it turns out that you're not being held back by a clearly bad behavior on one person's part, and it really is a conflict between parties, start to look for root causes. Are there separate goals? One person, sometimes you'll have departments who have different goals. A sales goal may be in conflict with a financial goal. A financial goal might be in conflict with an operational goal, right? So there are different roles within the company where you might have a almost myopic focus that only sees things through the lens of your department, and you can forget that a company mission is balanced between multiple stakeholders. So that would be one of the things, is watch for those conflicting goals. And if that happens, you can step back, build bigger, more comprehensive goals. Be smarter about goal setting. Look for misinterpretations. How often do you have a conflict and realize you said something that someone else interpreted as something very different than what you meant? I worked with a company years ago, and I was put in charge of a department that was failing and asked to turn that around. And so I stepped in and was working with folks and listening, learning, trying to understand what was going on, and felt like I was going through the proper steps, the right processes according to the good business and good values. And boy, I had one person on that team, the leader of the team, that just pushed back constantly pushed back. I got nothing but resistance. And finally I sat down with her and said, you got to tell me what's going on here. This is more than just having different ways of doing things. Feels personal. What's going on? And she said, well, you don't really want to know. And I said, honestly, if I didn't want to know, I wouldn't bother to ask. I really do want to know, and it's safe to tell me. And it took a while to convince her. And she said something that I had said months earlier. And I wish I could remember exactly what it was. But in essence, what had happened was she said probably something along the lines of, well, you act like your answers are the only good ones, Now, to me, that's so incredibly ridiculous based on my own history and my own philosophies of working with folks that it just seemed absurd. And it sounds like what I did was absolutely the wrong thing. I made a sarcastic reply. Yep, that's right. I'm the only one who ever has a right answer. I'm sure my tone was sarcastic, and I was assuming that anyone would pick that up as saying, yeah, that's ridiculous, But she was in a very sensitive position, fearful for her job. I was the new guy coming in. I didn't have any license to be sarcastic. That was not appropriate on my part. And so, I didn't even realize I'd done it. And so when she told me this months later, I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that, and I am so sorry. The reason I said that is because that is polar opposite of how I feel and how I want to work with you. So can we start over? She said, yeah. And we ended up making really good progress after that. But I went through, I believe it was a couple of months of just tons of resistance and me trying to figure out what can I do to turn this mess around. And am I going to have to fire this lady? She just has a bad attitude, right? And it turns out that I gave it to her. So sometimes you get misinterpretations of something, even without the sarcasm. What you say and what you mean by it can sound very different going through somebody else's filter. And so look for that. Also ask, where's the fear? A lot of times there's fear somewhere. What are they afraid of? If you ask that question, you're likely to come up with some pretty good answers. So start to dig. Those are not the only questions, but just kind of dig in. And as you look at the situation, be open to wondering and being curious. What's really going on here? And then watch. What's really going on here? And then watch. So as you do that, the right questions will come to mind, and then ask them. Don't be too quick, and don't jump to the answers. Let the questions rest for a while, and then talk about them with people rather than coming to conclusions all by yourself.
And this is a principle we talk about a lot in the book, the character of humility, right, is what brings you closer to truth. And you have to be willing. And it's not even that people are never necessarily deliberately misunderstanding or they're incredibly arrogant, but we tend to go through life assuming, often wrongly, that we at least have some basic idea of what's happening. We have a basic idea of what's going on around us, and we attribute our own feelings and perspective to other people. Like you said something that was so obviously sarcastic and unlike you for anyone who actually knew you, but she didn't know that. So just being willing to appreciate. We do a lot of assessments in our work, right? Assessments of personality, of character. And one of the biggest value, that was not a grammatically correct statement. The biggest value, one of the greatest returns I've seen from that is people being opened up to this idea that their perspective isn't always the only perspective. And it's not like they're bad people. I remember just a case with one young leader I was working with, and he had this assessment, and we were describing his viewpoint on having a fun workplace or something pretty simple. And he said, well, yeah, doesn't everybody? And that was my light bulb moment of, aha, this is great. Yes, no, everybody doesn't. Right?
Yep.
No,
Not
or
at all.
right, or if the words are the same, your understanding of the words are different. So I think that's
Exactly right.
just a huge, yeah. All right, number 4.
4, work on communications. You know what? A lot of people will tell you, we just need to be better at communication. Communication is our biggest problem. Here's a concern. Here's something I've learned. As soon as you say our only problem or our biggest problem or our problem is communications, you've just miscommunicated. Why would that be? But as soon as you make that statement, well, we just need to fix our communication. You just miscommunicated, and we need to learn to fix that, right? So why do I say that? Because communication, 2 reasons really. Communication means many different things and has many different components, and 2, it means different things to different people. So there was a study done way back in 1993. That wasn't that long ago for me, but for a lot of people it was before their lifetime, right? So anyway, 1993, there was a study done, and they were assessing culture in a number of large businesses, a number of large companies, and they went around and one of the questions was, communication is our greatest strength, a Likert scale, our greatest strength, all the way scaled down to our biggest problem. And pretty much, without exception, trying to remember, there were no exceptions that I became aware of. Each organization had the number 1 problem was communication. Interestingly, one of the other questions that came in that same assessment was, I am an above average communicator, an average communicator, or a below average communicator. And pretty much without exception, everybody answered the question with, I am an above average communicator. So how do these companies full of above average communicator have communications as their biggest problem, right? So communication is a number of things. It's informal. It's how we talk with each other. It's do we listen and not just talk. So a lot of people confuse elocution with communication, meaning a lot of people think, 'cause I talk good, I'm a good communicator, right? So doesn't work that way, right? I love the equation, 1 mouth, 2 ears, you do the math. To be a truly good communicator, you have to, at very least, listen twice as much as you talk. And then when you talk, speak with some perspective, right? The other thing is, what do we mean by communication? Is it formal communication? Is it informal communication? Are we talking about the company newsletter? Are we talking about how well we keep people updated in meetings? Are we talking about daily update meetings? Are we, you could go on and on about that. So really what needs to be communicated, and am I aware of the tools and the practices that will help me to be effective in communicating well? So starting with communication, start with listening. Seek first to understand. Establish effective formal and informal communications, interpersonal, meeting structure, and cadence. In this too, as you're working in this process of helping to resolve conflict, don't try to be the manager, be a mediator. So you're the one bringing sides together, helping them focus on a shared goal. You're not the one telling them straighten up and fly right or I'll fire you, right? Hopefully you don't get to that point. So you know what, real quickly, if you don't mind, I even wanted at this jump back to even number 1, something that popped up in my thoughts, where why is it so important to be proactive? Why is it so important to deal with this up front? Because that way you don't have to overreact. So let's say you're sitting with a team and somebody makes an offhanded, kind of harsh statement to somebody else on the team, and you can say, "Whoa, Betty, that sounded kind of harsh. That's not like you. What's going on?" You know what? I'm sorry, bad day, and you might, in that very moment, dig into a core issue and solve it right there, right then. no muss, no fuss. But if you sit quietly and a month later you can't stand it anymore, and now these two have been spiraling out of control, kind of going at each other because nobody wants to be talked to that way, and then you finally speak up, what's it likely to sound like? Oh my gosh, you people are driving me crazy. Can't you get along? What is wrong with you? You know, don't you realize we've got a job to do here, and we keep getting farther and farther behind because you keep sniping at each other? So very different, right? So not only do you not do that second thing that I just talked about because you let it go, but it makes it easier not to get pulled into that trap yourself when you become that mediator. And so kind of jumping back down to wrapping up on 4, be the mediator, not the manager. Don't let it be about your authority. Let it be about the shared mission.
Okay. So I have a question then. So as a leader and a manager, aren't there times where you're going to have to use that authority?
Absolutely. One of the things I would say about authority, if you're coaching through a problem, think of consequences. Coaching is really all about communicating consequences. So when you think of that, think of the level or hierarchy of consequences. The first consequence you communicate in coaching is going to be the natural consequence. As we focus on these things, we're losing focus on the mission. What would that look like to get back focused on the mission, and what is it that we all want here? Early on, that's oftentimes the only conversation you need to have. If that doesn't help, the next level of consequences is going to be to the people around you. When we act this way, it creates a tough work environment for us all. You know, this makes it hard for the person you're upset with, but it also makes it hard for the people around us. It just creates tension. So how do we get rid of that tension? What's going on here? That doesn't work. Might be, okay, I've had to deal with this now 4 or 5 times, and it's not going away. What's going on? And by the way, it's starting to take up my time. Now this is kind of where you start to cross that threshold. Now I'm starting to have to manage the problem and the people in the problem, right? So that becomes the consequence to me personally as that leader or the person who's dealing with it. And then the fourth and final, this is seldom, it's rare, and it's last, right? And because that final one is going to be, all right, we've dealt with this, we've written about it, we've gone through a PIP, I'm going to have to let you go, right? You're just not working out as part of this team and in service to this mission. So when you think about that, that's kind of, you very seldom have to get past step 1 and 2.
Right.
If you do,
just want to clarify, we're not talking about abdicating authority or telling people, oh, solve your own problems, right? You should be involved, and you should be, but as that coach and leader and mediator first.
Exactly right. Yeah. Don't just let it go. You know, we on the ranch here, we work with a hard-working border collie that helps us with livestock. Smart, hardworking. I wish everybody loved their job the way he loves his job. And I was watching an old video of an older Scottish dog trainer. Kind of, this guy was like the archetypical, iconic dog trainer for herding dogs. And one thing that he said is, if things start to go bad, put things away, go into your house, sit down, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, what are you doing wrong? And now, don't do exactly that, because you're not working with a dog, you're working with human beings, and their level of accountability is higher. However, as the leader, don't hesitate if things aren't going well to step back for a moment and say, am I on the right track here? Ask a few questions, maybe get some coaching from somebody else to say, hey, here's how I'm approaching that, and here's what's happening. A lot of times that other person can say, oh yeah, here's what you're doing that's actually contributing to that problem. Or no, I think you're on the right track. This person really is dug in. So it's okay to slow down and check yourself once in a while.
All right. Well, we strayed a little bit, I think, from communication, but really not. It's just communication covers a whole lot. Right?
Yes, it does. Which is kind of the point. Be specific. Right. When we're talking about communication, be specific, yeah. You could almost call that work on problem solving, right? Work on problem solving communication, but yeah.
And our last and fifth step.
Implement change, right? So if you've gone through this process, you've learned something. The people you're working with have learned something. You've uncovered a core problem. You've dealt with issues. You've refocused on a shared mission, right? So what are you going to do to be stronger and more cohesive and more productive into the future? So establish your shared purpose. Again, that's your mission, right? What is it that we're all working for here? Prioritize mutual respect. We don't always agree. As a matter of fact, if we did, I'd be worried. But we will always treat each other with respect. What does that look like? It means different things to different people. It's okay to talk about, what does respect look like to you, John? What's it look like to you, Rebecca? You know. And by the way, if I ever do something that comes across as disrespectful, please call it immediately, because it won't be my intent to be disrespectful. Create SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And then determine a follow-up strategy. How are we going to manage this process moving forward until it becomes just an ingrained part of our culture and how we work together? And it's going to take some time. Be patient with it. And probably some of the most important learning is going to come when you blow it. So when you get a little off track, don't say, oh my gosh, see, I knew you could never do it. We're a bunch of losers. When it goes a little off track, what do I learn from that, and how do we get it back on track? Just learning that course correction along the way, learning to do it early, is just a way to keep moving forward. So have a really good follow-up strategy and accountability.
All right, thank you. So just a quick recap, the 5 steps to resolving conflict in your team are to don't ignore it, don't avoid it, don't put it off, right? Address it when you see it. Deal with people who are behaving contrary to your organization's mission and values. Don't let that kind of behavior slide. And it might just be a quick coaching fix, right? Look for root causes. Often people deal with symptoms without looking at what's really underneath. Work on communications. And we mentioned that's a big spectrum. So be specific and follow through. And then finally, implement changes. Don't go through all this work just to have it happen again because you didn't make a plan and follow through, right? All right, we're John and Rebecca with Influence on Purpose. Thanks so much for joining us.
See you all next time. Thanks.